Hi, I'm Aaron Capato with Teen Press,
I'm Dustin Harris.
and this is Brian Knappenberg. Nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet
So this morning you did a talk back this morning with other people. With those other filmmakers, do you like bounce off any ideas with them and work well with them?
Yeah, I've met, and I'm friends with both of those filmmakers, Kirby Dick and Cullen, and just met Chelsea this morning. But yeah, it's fun. I think a group of filmmakers, especially documentary filmmakers, getting around, sitting around talking, gets into pretty interesting trouble sometimes.
um, do you have any projects at this current time? Like, are you filming anything, working on anything?
I am, but I can't tell you because then we'd have to indoctrinate you into the CIA and all of that, and it's just a messy process, and you might lose some of your digits and stuff. So, no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I'm always really, really fascinated and compelled to jump into new and interesting documentaries. I think we're in a really, really interesting and bizarre moment at that in which documentary filmmakers can dig in and really make an impact on things, being independent.
This morning you kept talking about media. Do you think media is gonna have a bigger impact later on your films?
Well, what I was saying about media is that it's an overly broad term that doesn't make a lot of sense, and it gets thrown around a lot. And actually, we all live in this highly mediated environment. And if you think about the media, I mean, the media gets bashed quite a bit. Donald Trump, to some degree, part of his rise was fueled on this kind of bashing of the media. But what does that even really mean? I mean, the media is Breitbart News, it's CNN, it's New York Times, it's what you guys are doing here. I mean, it is, and it's what documentary filmmakers do. It's Mad Men. It's it's social media. It's different kinds of media and ways of telling stories and interacting with the public. So it's really kind of in some ways an antiquated term. We live in a highly mediated environment now, and so we need a greater degree of media literacy to sort through everything that is coming, the information that is coming at us, and the word media is not that helpful in that.
Um, do you think with Twitter and you said about Trump, do you think we should limit his use on that? Like he's been using it in very bad ways. Like it's like at one point we have to tell him to stop because of the stuff he tweets, right?
Well, I think his use of Twitter is dangerous.
Yeah.
There's no question. I think that I think it's a part of his attack overall on journalism, and especially investigative journalism, and traditional media outlets, to go around them, to go straight to the people, which is actually fine. But he's pretty cavalier about what he puts out there, and I do think that could cause some pretty serious ramifications. But actually, to really answer your question, I would say no. I'm not a fan of restricting anybody's access, including people who I don't like very well. I wasn't a big fan, for instance, of the alt-right getting kicked off of Twitter, and I really hate those people. Like, I really hate those people, but I'm a free speech advocate, and that includes a broad range of speech. I think ultimately we're healthier with more voices, including those that we don't like. He's in a particularly powerful position where a tweet could change the stock market, could affect the health of a company with real employees, could get us into war. There's no question he is cavalier, and he is irresponsible in the way that he behaves in that sense. But I'm not a fan of restricting it.
Um, do you think that with everything going on that media will like soon play out against you, and like any like in a bad way or like a good way? I'd say either way.
Well, what do you mean play out against me? You mean
Like in your films, like didn't you have one with Hulk Hogan? Like,
yeah, I mean, I'm not, you know, what does media mean? It's just the landscape of rigorous discussion that's happening right now, and that is taking place on all sorts of different platforms, electronically, in all sorts of different sort of technological ways. We are communicating, we are telling stories, we are, it's still some traditional stuff, it's still television, it's still film, it's still to some degree even print newspaper, but it's changing. We get our news sources from different places now, and I don't think media is just a way of describing the landscape of the discussion that's happening more than anything. And if you come out strong with it in one position, you might get a backlash on Twitter, or you might get, standing up for Gawker. Actually, it caused quite a bit of at one point at least, especially right after the verdict, really caused a backlash. People said, "Well, Gawker deserved it." It's like, well, did they deserve it? If you look through the details, so of course, some of the backlash that you see on social media sites, particularly Twitter, is a kind of automated backlash, which is the result of bots and other things that in which the medium is being manipulated in various ways. So it's a much more complicated environment than it used to be 10 years ago, and in some ways if there's a backlash, the people that argue against you or that you come up against sometimes they're not even people. The forces are unclear sometimes, including who's funding them. So it's a much more chaotic environment than we used to see. So but that's where we are, and that's the environment we have to live in and try to comport to some degree, to some basically some kind of traditional views of free speech and the right to protest, the right to campaign publicly for political positions, and to really engage in a society.
So there's a lot of fake news going on and around. Do you think there's a way that citizens, people that are exposed to this stuff could tell the difference between what's real and what's fake, and what not to believe, and
Yeah, I think that goes back to this notion of media literacy, which I think should be just taught in all schools all the time, and something that we should all really encourage. This notion that you begin to know where your news is coming from, what sources you can trust, what individual writers you can trust. And in this environment where everything is chaotic, it may not be the way it was 30 years ago when there was really just three television news sources. That's it. They all kind of fell in line together, and there was a very small group of people, and so the kinds of stories that they were telling was limited. And yet everybody agreed. Well, we don't live in that world now. Nobody agrees, and there's a gazillion sources of news. So I think in that chaos, you start to trust certain sources. You invest yourself. I think people should subscribe to sources and pay, for monthly subscription rates to sources, to encourage the ones that they think are working, and we're going to figure out how to work and deal with this world and this new world of information, and begin to sort out the nonsense, separate the signal from the noise.
Have any of your films ever has anybody tried to call you out by using any the facts or anything like that, have been oh, this isn't true, but it's your own insight? Is your film your own opinion, or is it your own?
Yeah, I try to tell stories, and I think there's a couple of thoughts triggered by that question. I try to tell stories, and we're very, very careful to get the facts correct, and we're very, very careful about that. We go through everything that's said in our films and look at it, and some of it is opinion, and that's fine, as long as that you have a sense that it's being presented as opinion. If we're saying it and it's factual, we check those facts pretty rigorously. But I think you can do that. And by the way, engage people who disagree with you. That's a really critical part, to actually talk to people who disagree with you, absorb their opinions. It's good because it's more fair, but it's also good because it's better storytelling, and it's more interesting. And a lot of times when you're making films, that's when it starts to kind of click, and the little spark starts to happen when you're rigorously talking to people who disagree with you. That said, I don't think anybody would look at least my three last films and wonder what side I come down on. I do have a point of view. So I'm presenting that as transparent, being as transparent about that as possible as well. So I think good storytelling is working on all of those levels.
All right. So, do you have any questions, Dustin?
Yeah. With journalism now, I mean, we consider journalists. With Trump attacking the media and attacking journalists, and this new generation of journalists, some of them may not want to go down that road because of being attacked. What kind of things would you have to say to them in order to maybe encourage them from those attacks? I mean, besides ignore it.
Yeah, I would say don't be scared. Just go after it. I mean, it's easy to look at these attacks and to some degree they're designed to have a chilling effect. They're designed to threaten. I mean, this guy's a bully, but poke him back in the eye, push back on him. We have the First Amendment. It is stronger than he is. And so, look, he may also use extrajudicial ways of attacking people. He may use of course, there's a threat that he may use the great powers of his office, the executive branch of the United States government, one of the most powerful institution in the world. He may use those tools against people he disagrees with or who are criticizing him. That might happen, but that doesn't mean that basic fabric of who we are, that First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, that we should turn away from that. If anything, we should go stronger at him, harder at him, more people going after him in more different ways. Fight him harder and stand up for that, because that's important, way more important than any single individual in any office.
Where do you see journalism going in the future? Journalism's changing all the time with different generations and stuff. So where do you see it going?
You mean with technology and stuff?
Yeah, technology and just in general kind of as well with different ways of doing journalism.
Yeah, I mean, I think and I hope journalism is in a precarious place right now. I think we are in this kind of period where journalism has lost a lot of its revenue. Sources of revenue to the internet. Basically, it's lost a lot of its advertising revenue, which supported it for a very long time, and a lot of news organizations are struggling to figure out what's next. There's a new form of journalism, a business model that is struggling to be born. It's not born yet. It's not fully formed yet, and in this sort of early period, it's just getting pounded in so many ways by, obviously by Trump, who is irresponsibly taking on, calling them the enemy of the people. I mean, that's ridiculous. So journalism itself is being attacked by the President of the United States. It's also being attacked in all the ways that my film illustrates, in terms of, or in some sort of secretive ways in which money is corrupting and corroding it. There's been problems, legitimate problems, I think, with journalism being corporatized over time, being too cozy with power, and I would, and I would also add to that a whole array of outside political groups that have spent a ton of money to sort of in some ways fuel the fake news phenomenon. Fake news has been with us since the first elections, really. If you think about it, I bet you if you went back to the first election ever in human history, one person would be saying fake things about the other person, right? That's probably true, right? And that's always been there. But now that stuff is fueled by big money and dark money that is hard to trace in groups, outside political organizations, and that's creating that content. That's a problem. That's new. So, any vision of journalism going into the future is going to have to have a model for which that supports it, that keeps it independent. I think we're in a period where we're being reminded of what the purpose of journalism is. Is nothing like having a common enemy to remind you why you're there in the first place. That seems to be an effect of the Trump phenomenon as well. So, there's going to be new tools. It's going to be a new environment. There's going to be new players that we don't always understand because and the way that they're changing this environment. But what's important? What's important is First Amendment, free press, adversarial to power, those sorts of things. And if we can remember that as we move into this new technological world, I think we're going to be okay.
All right, so this is Aaron with Team Press. I'd like to thank you, Brian, for your time.